people think they're healthy, but we all have blind spots. And until you do the advanced diagnostics, you don't even realize what you don't know. And that's the problem. I studied epigenetics, which is a fancy term for the science of how your lifestyle, your behavior, your environment affects your genetic expression, the way your body works, basically. And I realized that I was onto something when I started sharing this newfound passion of mine with my patients, and they were getting great results as well by not throwing drugs at them, but focusing on identifying the underlying problem and fixing it, typically with lifestyle medicine, with supplements, with behavioral change. One of my taglines is one size fails all, because what's right for one person is wrong for the next.
Dr. Tracy, welcome to the Everyday Millionaire podcast. So excited to have this conversation with you today. So thanks for joining me.
Oh, glad to be here. Thanks so much.
So, Dr. Tracy, I like to open because, bios are great. And, I read your bio and share your notes, but it's never as effective as when my guests answer the question that when somebody walks up to them and says, "Hey, Dr. Tracy, what do you do?" What's your answer to that question? Because you've had quite a journey.
So plain and simple, I help high-performing leaders be their absolute best again. So I come from the traditional healthcare world. I spent 25 years as a board-certified urologist. And long story short, through my own health issues, I came to find that our healthcare system is broken. And I went back to school and spent a decade learning it all over again the right way, learning functional medicine, regenerative medicine, hormones, peptides, epigenetics, you name it. And what I've come to learn is our health can be our greatest asset or our biggest liability. And I work with so many high-performing leaders, founders, executives, CEOs, millionaires, billionaires who take their health for granted, who don't recognize how their health and the way their mind and body works directly affects how they show up every day. It directly affects their income and their impact. And so this is why I'm so passionate about working with high-performing entrepreneurs and leaders, because if you don't focus on your health, you have nothing.
Well, that boils down to the old, without health, wealth doesn't matter, or you spend your life making money to then respend it on staying healthy. So you stay alive to be able to spend it. I mean, there's all sorts of analogies that go along with that. Now, is your focus primarily on men or is it on women as well? Where are you in that?
Great question. Yeah, we serve both men at the Gapin Institute, my center. We serve both men and women around the country. So we serve both. My background, my passion has always been men's health, and that's always been my area of interest and focus. But what happened years ago when we opened our center 5-6 years ago, the wives came in, well, what about me? And so we built that entire women's health team as well, recognizing how important it is that couples do it as a team and that you get much better results when you work together. So definitely important that both men and women appreciate this as well. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that, because my own journey over the past many years has been on my own health. And I've been very blessed to, not have ever really suffered any illness. I don't even remember the last time I had a cold. I am very focused on my health. I train regularly. And although I've, go in and out of over the years of, maybe weight management, my overall health has always been my priority. And, today, as I'm getting close to turning 67 years old, I just really embrace the fact that I can do what I do physically. And that's and the fact that I'm as healthy as I am. And that's, I know, is my commitment to learning and gaining knowledge, having conversations with experts like yourself. And so I'm only saying that to, for listeners to get that it is so important. And we actually set the trajectory for where we are. I didn't set the trajectory, although you can kind of backpedal and catch up. I mean, I've been doing some form of training and paying attention to diet and all those things, supplements, all my life, or certainly most of my life. But that set the trajectory for where I am today. Now, you talked, Dr. Tracy, about your own health issue. Can we get a little bit of background there and then kind of see where your trajectory kind of started and went?
Absolutely. Before I get there, I want to push back on you a little bit. I'm gonna have a little fun here for a moment, because this is the most common thing I hear. I hear this every day. I'm fine. No, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm healthy. And what I always like to ask people is, how do you know you're healthy? You think you're healthy. you feel healthy.
Mhm.
But let me give you an example of situations that really drive home the point that you're not as healthy as you think you are. So Bob Harper, he is the lead fitness trainer on the TV show The Biggest Loser, right? He teaches people how to lose weight and get in shape. The guy trains for a living. That's what he does.
Mhm.
Until one day a few years ago, at the age of 51, Bob Harper had a massive heart attack that almost
Mhm.
killed him.
Mhm.
Bob thought he was healthy, just like you. I'm doing everything great. I'm training every day. I'm in the gym.
Mhm.
Guy almost died.
Mhm.
Guy almost died because he wasn't having the right testing done, because our traditional healthcare system doesn't look at the right markers. People don't get the right testing done. They barely scratch the surface, and he missed a major blind spot.
Mhm.
So this is why I talk about blind spots in your health. My brother-in-law, John Florig, he was 49 years old. He was the epitome of discipline and in great shape at the gym every day, eating the perfect diet, looked amazing.
Mhm.
He thought he was healthy. We thought he was healthy until one morning getting ready for work at the age of 49, John dropped dead.
Wow.
And so I just like to push back a little bit whenever someone says I'm healthy. But my question is, how do you know? Have you looked at your
You're
microbiome? Have you looked at your hormones? Have you looked at inflammation, blood sugar? All
yeah,
these key markers we could talk about. So
yeah.
I just like to play a little bit and just point out that people think they're healthy, but we all have blind spots. And until you do the advanced diagnostics, you don't even realize what you don't know. And
Yeah.
that's the problem.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
and I'm a little bit of a weirdo that way. So yes, I have had testing done, and so I know where my
Love it.
markers are. And like I
Love it.
said, I'm a little bit odd that way, and it's because it's just something I got really interested in and continue to do. And then there's another side of it, which I get a little critical of, what we call our healthcare system. I always say we should rephrase it and call it disease care, because it's certainly not healthcare.
Yeah.
And so, but that we go off on those kind of tangents. But you make such a valid point. And I
Yeah.
and I can't, and I 100% see it. I agree with it. And this part of what started my journey even a few years ago, even going deeper, was understanding the difference between wellness and fitness. So,
Yeah.
you described a couple of your acquaintances or friends, that were very fit, but what they discovered and what you've seen is they're not well. And
Yeah.
there is a difference between fitness and wellness. And I would like to even have your perspective on that
Sure.
conversation. And,
Yeah.
my mom, for example, I'll just use her as a quick example, is, she's 97 years old. And although physically she's broken down, she's quite healthy mentally and all the rest of it. But the point is that over the years, she was never fit, but she was always well. She was doing
Mhm.
yoga. She walked
Yeah.
regularly. She did some kind of activity on a regular basis. She did pay attention to her diet, etc. So although her fitness level wasn't high compared
Yeah.
to even a
Sure.
part-time athlete, she certainly
Mhm.
was well. So I use that kind of distinction, and that would be, I think, a cool
Yeah.
part of the conversation as well. What's your thoughts?
Yeah. That'd be great. Yeah. So, absolutely. And I see a lot of men and women who look incredibly healthy on the outside. They feel healthy, but then when you do deeper dive, you find they have massive issues with cardiovascular health. They have issues with blood sugar regulation, not just from diet, but from other stressors to our system.
Mhm.
They have issues with microbiome. Our gut controls the entire body. It controls our immune system, our hormones, our neurotransmitters in our brain. It controls our metabolism, energy systems. Everything is in some way controlled by the microbiome. Most people don't ever even look at it,
Mhm.
right? Nutrient levels, hormones is a massive one that people
Huge.
discount. It's so important. And so you're absolutely right that I'll see a lot of bodybuilders who look great on the outside, and then you lift up the hood and realize, holy cow, there's a lot of inflammation. There's a lot of dysbiosis in the gut. There's blood sugar imbalance. And I'll give you a great example. Another story is Sean. He's actually a PA who works with me. He looks great on the outside. He's in the gym every day, eating great, and he looks awesome. And his lipid numbers even look really good. For him, the VO2 max testing. So VO2 max is a measure of
Mhm.
fitness level.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's a cardiopulmonary fitness test where you wear a mask, you're on either a stationary bike or a treadmill,
It
right?
sucks. It
And
sucks.
yeah, you know about it. And his was terrible. His results were awful. And he looks great. Something wasn't right. We did testing on Sean. As amazing as he looks, he had a terrible calcium score. Calcium score is looking at hard, mature calcified plaque in the coronary vessels, the blood vessels to your heart. And on a clearly AI heart scan, he actually had partial blockage of his LAD, the main blood vessel to his heart,
Wow.
at age 38 years old.
Wow.
And so you're spot on. Absolutely, I agree with you that a lot of people who look healthy on the outside, they're not healthy on the inside for sure.
So can you, and I know there's a lot of terminology that people won't be familiar with, but I think it's great to at least plant the seeds of thought in, or the
Sure.
of terminology. So when you start measuring and getting benchmarks of a potential or a patient, what kind of things are you looking at? You mentioned VO2 max, and I have
Yeah.
some familiarity with it. What, with somebody that you say, okay, you're healthy, you're working, you're not an athlete, you're maybe a weekend warrior, you do a VO2 max, and
Yeah.
what would be a reasonable or a healthy VO2 max given that you're not an athlete?
Yeah, and there's for VO2 max specifically, there's a range that depends on age, and so it honestly depends on your age,
Yeah.
and it also depends on your fitness level as well. And so you look at an 80-year-old grandma versus a 38-year-old healthy guy, that number is going to be very different. So you
Sure.
need to kind of look at it in perspective. But I like to look at it first when I talk about finding your blind spots, and this is really what I always people say, where do you start? I would start with blood labs as the best way to get going.
Mm-hmm.
And there are 5 general categories that I look at in blood labs. There's cardiovascular health, and believe it or not, total cholesterol, LDL, HDL, like your doctor would typically order, they barely scratch the surface, and I would argue they're fairly irrelevant. So there are other markers. ApoB is the one most important test everyone should be getting. ApoB, or apolipoprotein B, most important marker when it comes to lipids. LP little a, it's called. It looks like an A with a parentheses around it. That's a genetically inherited one. That's the Bob Harper one I was telling you about earlier. His was massively elevated. Doctors never checked it. And so there are other markers cardiovascular health wise. Hormones is the second category, and every man and woman should be looking at free testosterone. Most doctors only look at total. They're missing the most important marker, free testosterone. For thyroid hormone, important for men and women, free T3. Most doctors don't check this. DHEA, cortisol, nitric oxide, vitamin D is actually a critical hormone that everyone needs to be looking at. Yeah. So a lot of hormones. The third category is inflammation. Inflammation is the driver of the aging process, and that's why a lot of people call it inflammaging. So markers like CRP is a great measure of systemic chronic inflammation.
Yeah.
Ferritin, uric acid is another one. Then the fourth category would be blood sugar regulation. And here we're looking at both short-term and long-term markers of how well your body's regulating blood sugar. You cannot build muscle. You can't burn fat. You're not going to have energy like you need. Your brain, mind's not going to work like it needs to if blood sugar is not controlled.
Mm-hmm.
And people think that you're either normal or you're diabetic and either black or white. Well, it's actually not that simple. There's a spectrum of what's called insulin sensitivity, how well your body controls blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And when that's off, you're fighting an uphill battle in many ways when it comes to performance on a daily basis. So that's the fourth category. And the fifth one is nutrient levels. Things like magnesium and zinc and homocysteines, looking at B complex vitamins, B12 and folate, and some other markers of nutrient levels are so important. So that's the blood labs. When it comes to functional testing, there's gut health testing, look at markers of gut health and gut permeability. Is called how well is your microbiome balanced and the gut wall integrity. Cortisol is our stress hormone.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to tell you, almost everyone listening to this show, your show, entrepreneurs, people who are focused on making money and growing their wealth, they're stressed. They don't want to admit it, but they're stressed.
Mm-hmm.
And I can actually measure it. I can prove it with a test, a cortisol test. It's a salivary hormone test we do with 4 different spot tests throughout the day. And we can see the pattern of your cortisol. Tells a lot about your internal stress levels. Most people think they're not stressed, but they are, and we can measure it and we can fix it.
So,
food sensitivity. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dr. Tracy. Go ahead.
I was going to finish. Food sensitivities is another functional test that we do. So often people have issues with temporary short-term food sensitivities that leads to brain fog, inflammation, low energy, difficulty burning fat, losing weight, building muscle kind of stuff. So these are some classic tests that everyone should be getting done.
So when we start to, I mean, when we consider age, youth has a lot of flex, right? We seemingly feel maybe indestructible in our 20s and even our 30s. Perhaps in our 40s, we're starting to feel a little bit, out of whack. But what would be some of the reasons? So, for example, your friends, the couple guys that you mentioned that were actually really unhealthy, although they seemed healthy on the outside, maybe even felt healthy on the outside. why would they go and get this kind of testing? So would somebody reflect and say, okay, I've got some relatives that have, early, heart attacks or stuff going on. Is there something that would say I should just go because, or because most people are going to wait till there's a problem? That's
This
my
is a perfect question. Yes. And you're exactly right. And this is what's wrong with our broken healthcare system. Our disease care system, you call it, it's broken, it's reactive, it's passive, it waits until there's a problem. My book I put out several years ago was called Male 2.0. Male 1.0 was all about waiting until there's a problem, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of mentality. And that's what our healthcare system has trained us instinctually to do, to just wait and be passive. And if I feel okay, then I must be healthy.
Mhm,
And so you're exactly right. What I think the paradigm needs to shift toward is being proactive,
mhm.
being intentional, do the advanced diagnostics. Why? Because I have a higher purpose. Because I have a higher purpose, and that purpose can be anything. It could be you're an athlete, it could be you're an executive, you could be a parent, and you want to be there to see your grandkids.
Mhm,
It could be a lot of different reasons. What's your why?
mhm.
That should drive you to focus on, what are the blind spots that I'm missing? We're so focused on, like you mentioned earlier, our wealth, but your health is your key driver of your success.
Yeah.
And so you're asking the right question. The answer is people need to start taking a very different, more intentional, proactive approach. Just get the testing done. And if
Yeah.
the test is fine, then you're great. You're good. But I guarantee you're going to find a lot of stuff you had no idea was even happening under the hood.
There's a philosophy that I have that I actually work with some of my coaching clients over the years, and just in general, my basic philosophy when I'm working with individuals, that why that you talk about, I indicate to people. If I was speaking to you and I go, listen, Dr. Tracy, you are the center of your universe. You are in the middle of it, and around you is your friends, there's family, there's your business, there's your workmates or your peers, there's the community. You are the center of that universe. And if for no other reason, you owe it to yourself to look after you in order to look after all of the things that you look after, and you owe it to them. It is the most selfless thing you can do, is to go through the process of assessing your health, mental, emotional, physical, all aspects of your health, so that you are the best version of you as the center of your universe, so that you can in fact support all the things that you want to support, that you're driven to do, that you're inspired to do. That's how I position the why, by the way. It just brings it into, don't feel selfish, don't feel greedy, don't feel like, oh gosh, I'm more important than anybody. No, you are the most important person in the world to everybody around you that you are
Yeah.
looking after and responsible for. So that's my kind of rant on that conversation.
I love it, and I think people don't even realize how far off they are from functioning at their highest level, at their, peak performance. To me, is not about being an Olympian or being an Ironman triathlete. It's about showing up every day and being your best as a parent, as a leader, as a business owner, as
Yes.
a millionaire, whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And there's a great quote I love to share. It's by this philosopher, this Greek philosopher from literally 108 AD. Okay, this is from like almost 2,000 years ago. And Epictetus said, how long are you going to wait before you demand the best for yourself?
Mm.
How long are you going to wait before you demand the best for yourself?
Mhm.
And most of us wait until it's too late, wait till there's a problem. And you don't even realize how every day you're suffering without even realizing it.
Well, let's talk about your journey a little bit. You spent many
Yeah.
years in as a doctor in the healthcare system, and then you had your own challenge. And one
Yeah.
day you kind of wake up and go, "Holy crap, something's going on here that I'm not paying attention to." So even with your training and being in it, you
Yeah.
you kind of you missed the mark. You're operating on top of it. It was your blind spot. So
I lived it. Yeah.
yeah, so give me a little bit of that story. I think it would really give context to all of what
Yeah.
you're doing.
Sure. So, yeah, as I said, earlier, I was a board certified urologist for about 25 years. About halfway into that career, I'm about 39, 40 years old. I hit a wall. I was stressed out because I'm in the hospital every night operating. I'm doing robotic surgery, treating prostate cancer every day, saving lives every day, and neglecting myself in the process. And I wake up one day and I am exhausted. I am 30 pounds overweight, so I'm fat. I'm tired. I'm not a happy man. I realized, when I walked in the hospital every day, I didn't like who I was. I
Mhm.
was a miserable human being. And, they talk about surgeons being assholes. I truly was. And it's because I wasn't really living my best life, and my health suffered because of it. here I was, a men's health expert, and I was sacrificing myself for the sake of my business, my career, my patients. And so my wife convinced me to finally go get a physical. And so at age 40, I go to this local concierge doc here in town, Sarasota, Florida, and I got my first physical exam ever. And it was a very eye-opening, vulnerable experience to be on the other side of that experience. I was always the doctor up until then. Here I am sitting on this exam table wearing one of those thin little paper gowns, and my butt's not even covered, and incredibly vulnerable feeling. And he was going through my lab numbers, talking about my mortality numbers because my lipids were off and my cholesterol was high and my creatinine and my kidney function was off. My liver numbers weren't perfect. And he said, you need to lose some weight and probably need to put you on a statin.
A statin? Wow.
A statin. And that was it.
That's a wake up.
That was it.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, wow. Like I left that day and I was, suddenly aware of my own mortality. So it was a very, eye-opening moment for me. But I knew that there was more to it than just that, more to it than just a statin. And I started researching. I started studying. And that got me to go back to school. And I studied epigenetics, which is a fancy term for the science of how your lifestyle, your behavior, your environment affects your genetic expression, the way your body works, basically.
Mm-hmm.
That got me learning, wait a second, it's a lot more than just a drug, a lot more than just a pharmaceutical. And then I trained in functional medicine. And then I trained in hormone therapy, doing it the right way. And they don't ever teach you this stuff in urology training. They teach you how to prescribe drugs and do surgery.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I learned about peptides and peptide therapy, this amazing cutting edge, regenerative field of how to help the body heal itself. And I started putting all these pieces together. And I was able to turn my health around, and I lost the weight, I regained my energy and focus, and I felt great. And I realized that I was onto something when I started sharing this newfound passion of mine with my patients, and they were getting great results as well by not throwing drugs at them, but focusing on identifying the underlying problem and fixing it, typically with lifestyle medicine, with supplements, with behavioral change.
So So, Dr.
Yeah,
Tracy, sorry to interrupt, but just so I can stay on the
yeah,
same path, is that
yeah.
given what you're doing today, have you've got a very traditional medical science-based background, and would you say that you've kind of evolved a little to a more holistic approach and with the science in behind it, but holistically looking at how you can take better care of yourself, have your body and work with your body to look after itself better? Is that a fair kind of view of what you're doing these days? Like I say, you've got lots of science behind it and all the things, but are you taking a more holistic approach as opposed to looking to prescribe a drug, or and instead of doing that, saying, okay, let's start this process and here's some supplements where I'm seeing that would benefit?
So I've completely shifted the whole paradigm of men's health. Yes, to answer your question, yes, I've evolved to where I do nothing now. My team, I have medical team, I have functional medicine trained health coaches. We look at wearable technology. We look at genetics. We look at advanced functional testing, full body imaging. And we're prescribing nutrition meal plans. We're prescribing fitness programming. We're prescribing some targeted supplementation. We're using some cutting edge peptides to help people get there quicker. We're optimizing hormones, and we're doing it all in a very personalized, precise manner. And I'll tell you, I can't remember the last time I actually prescribed an actual pharmaceutical.
Right.
And so we have completely shifted the paradigm now. So holistic, yes, I would say that's certainly an accurate descriptor of it all. It is really what we do at the Gapin Institute is we are, and this is my passion, this has become my mission now, is to really redefine healthcare. And for me, my passion started in men's health, but this applies to women as well. How do we help leaders be their absolute best again, not by throwing drugs, pharmaceuticals at you, but by optimizing every part of your body? And typically, that does not require a drug. That requires understanding at a personalized level based on your genetics, based on functional testing, based on labs, based on wearable technology, how your body's working, what are the blind spots, and how do we fix that? And that's very different. Every individual, one of my taglines is one size fails all, because what's right for one person is wrong for the next. And this is what's wrong with our healthcare system. And it's also what's wrong with all the influencers out there right now on Instagram and Twitter and and
Yeah.
all the other social platforms shooting all over you, telling you what you should do. Well,
Yeah.
it depends. And so, absolutely, this has become my passion to really take a very different approach to health and performance and longevity.
So can you just, because you've dropped the word a couple of times, leptins and peptides, can you give us a kind of a real kind of rookie kind of understanding of what that is and why we should pay attention to them? I got a bunch of questions. Like you're really firing in my wheelhouse of what I'm interested
Yeah.
in. So can you give me some insights into what those mean and why they matter?
Peptides?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So peptides are simply short proteins. Okay. They're simply a specific sequence of amino acids. And a protein is just a long sequence of amino acids, very specific amino acids. So a peptide is under 100 amino acids in length. It's called a peptide. Longer than that, it's called a protein. It's that simple.
Hmm.
Now, peptides have become popular in the last, I started prescribing them about 10, 12 years ago now. They become popular because they allow us to achieve very precise, specific outcomes because they are signals. They're signaling molecules that your body recognizes because they come from our own bodies. So there are signals that come from our own stomach that helps reduce systemic inflammation. There are peptides that come from our thymus gland, which shrinks away when we're an infant, so it's gone the rest of your life. But critical immune cells come from your thymus gland that can help you heal from illness, heal from injury, heal from
Hmm.
surgery. There are peptides that can help you with energy, cognitive function, focus, mental acuity, weight loss, musculoskeletal repair, gut issues, you name it, anxiety, depression, sexual health issues. There are peptides that can help you, and they are signals that come from our own bodies. They are sequenced. They are made by compounding pharmacies, but the actual sequence comes from our own body. So they're not drugs, they're not pharmaceuticals. They are able to achieve very specific outcomes for us.
Hmm.
They come in oral, some are oral, some are injectable, some are nasal spray, some are topical. It
Right.
depends on what the peptide is. Now,
Got
a
it.
couple words of caution. Number one is, first caution is, there are a lot of stores that anyone can go to as a consumer and buy peptides with a simple credit card
Hmm.
swipe. I would caution you against anyone doing that directly because these pharmacies, these stores have very little quality assurance, oversight, purity, inspection, FDA regulations.
Uh,
You don't know what you're getting. And
yeah.
there are a lot of studies that have shown they either have nothing in them or they have heavy metals. And so you want to be really careful buying them directly. I prescribe them from reputable, FDA regulated and overseen compounding pharmacies that have purity, authenticity, quality assurance, verification on a daily basis. So that's the first caveat. The second caveat is, some people think that peptides are the magic bullet and they can solve everything. And like you've probably heard of semaglutide, which has become a very popular peptide in the last couple of years, a weight loss peptide.
You're right.
The problem with this type of approach is, I think a peptide is like the icing on a cake, the frosting. Okay. The cake, the ingredients of that cake is made of proper gut health, nutrition, hormones, sleep, fitness, mindset, toxins, environment. All of these things come together, these ingredients, and help you optimize and bake that cake. Then the peptides are a great way to augment that to make it even better. Think of how good, how like frosting can completely change a cake, right?
Hmm.
That's what we're talking about here. Some people try to just buy the can of frosting and eat that by itself. It's not the same thing. And so that's the analogy I like to use. The peptides are awesome, but there's context and nuance that they're part of a much bigger, more comprehensive, like as you use the term, holistic approach that's so important.
So when we look at what's going on in the world these days and the food that's out there, the knowledge of food, I mean, I don't know where I want to go with it, but I think about the understanding that you have, for example. And do you think that, given how the world has been changing over the years, even the quality of foods, the availability of fast foods, there's a part of it that I understand, and I don't ever eat fast food. It's not a thing, it never has been. But it seems that food becomes almost, some of those foods become addictive, and people don't even realize that they're addicted to those foods. It affects your mood, it affects, and it becomes that whole downward spiral. So where am I going with this? I think this is a, this is almost a societal trend, if you will. It has been for many years. I don't know if it's seems to be getting worse as people feel more stress, more discourse in what's happening in the world today. Do you see, or do you have to deal with, or do you deal with that? You mentioned it, that mindset part of it, that attitude, because there is some of it, that we get into these downward spirals, and it's like, I'm bummed out, I go to food. I'm bummed out, I eat chips. I'm bummed out, like, so it becomes this downward spiral that is really difficult
Yeah.
to reverse
Yeah.
that downward spiral.
Sure.
What philosophically, where are you and
Yeah.
your team at?
Sure. We talk a lot about this, and I've some YouTube videos that really dive deeper into this topic. But in general, a lot of the packaged processed refined foods now, they're hyper palatable. They're full of inflammatory seed oils. The oils
Yes.
used to cook foods at restaurants or in packages now clearly promote inflammation, which is tied to cardiovascular disease and mortality, longevity issues. The other big issue that doesn't get enough attention is endocrine disruption. So this is a big
Mm.
topic for me as it relates to men's health, especially with low testosterone. So we know that testosterone levels are literally half what they were 20 to 30 years ago worldwide. 3 massive studies have shown this.
Why is that?
Why?
Do we know why?
Yeah, why the big issue, without question, is endocrine disruptors, which are chemicals, toxins in our environment that have been shown to crush hormones,
Mm.
cause autoimmune disease, cause precocious puberty, cause cancers, cause all infertility, cause all ADHD, cause all kinds of health and mental health issues. They're crushing our mind, crushing our body. And endocrine disruptors are especially found in our foods. So, atrazine is a common herbicide that's sprayed in our crops, especially in the Midwest. And so a lot of our foods are poisoned, not only with the seed oils and the refined sugars and all that, but they're poisoned with these chemicals, things like atrazine, glyphosate, other chemicals that are in our food. There are chemicals in our drinking water. So if you're not filtering your water, you're drinking a high level of chemicals. For example, women's birth control, synthetic estrogen is found in massive levels in our drinking water because our treatment plants can't clear it. And so I like to joke that all men out there, you're on the pill because you're drinking water that's laden with these estrogenic chemicals that are crushing your hormones. They're causing inflammation. They're making you store fat. They're causing cancers. They are ruining us. They're in our personal care products. So soap and shampoo and deodorant and sunscreen and laundry detergent. I tell you, everywhere you turn, there are chemicals and toxins that are killing us. And so I'm really big on being very intentional about what you eat, what you drink, and what you put on your body and the products you use, because it's a compounding effect when you're surrounded by this. I call it a soup of endocrine disruption everywhere you turn.
Mm. That's so fascinating. You're the first person that I've ever heard talk about estrogen levels in our water, given the birth control that's necessary in for women. And I'm going, wow. And then they can't filter it, they can't clean it up. Like, holy cow, that's a bit eye
It's scary.
opening. It kind of
Yeah.
reminds me of, everybody was on, soy being the thing to do, but understanding what that meant for males, particularly,
Yeah.
and the impact that
Yeah.
would have.
Right.
Do you think that it's coming more into these? I'm thinking about Kennedy and his mission to make America healthy again. I don't know what your stand is on that. I don't follow it that closely. On the surface, I'm going, good for you. You're shutting down seed oils. Do you think that's a good initiative? Are you kind of following along with it, Dr. Tracy?
Yeah, I am, and I like to stay out of the politics
Yeah,
because I know you're going to piss off half the people. But I love what's happening. I love that there's increased awareness of it. Look, it's all in the spirit of how do we get healthier, and we know that seed oils are causing massive inflammation. These are industrial chemicals that were never meant to be used in food, and
Mhm.
so it's simply bringing awareness to how do we get healthy. And what could be more important than that? Like my whole career, my life is based upon helping people get healthy. And
Mhm.
so I am wholeheartedly a staunch supporter in doing everything we can to eliminate seed oils, eliminate refined sugars, eliminate endocrine disruptors,
because
they are crushing our health.
It's a couple of years ago, I quit drinking, and for no other reason than one day I think I either saw a video or I read something from a very credible doctor who said, make no mistake, alcohol is toxic to your body. Full stop. Doesn't matter. We get away with it. We do what we do, but ultimately it's toxic. And so, yes, we justify it, qualify it, quantify it. Glass of wine is good for you every night or whatever the story is. And I'm not making anybody wrong. I've certainly had my fair share of wine. But a couple of years ago, I just quit drinking. I said, I don't know why I'm doing it. It's not that I don't enjoy it, but really, why do I do it? And so I just quit. And it was like, now 2 years later, if somebody said to me, what have you noticed the difference? I actually would have to say, I don't know what it was, but I was drinking fairly regular. I would have a glass of wine probably every night at least. And so I don't know what the benefits are, other than I decided at some point, I like food. And if I'm going to get calories, I prefer to get it from food rather than alcohol, especially given alcohol is toxic. So I don't know where I was going with that comment, but just understanding the way that we kind of view our bodies and our health and the awareness that is coming out. Like if I wouldn't have heard that statement, maybe I wouldn't have considered it. I don't know. I'm kind of wired that way anyways. But in the world of alcohol, any thoughts or any comments in your research that you want to point out to the listeners?
Thank you. So there's so much around alcohol that people don't recognize. It's the calories, sure. It causes inflammation. It crushes your hormones. It destroys your microbiome, which is a stressor to your system. It leads to systemic inflammation, which further perpetuates weight gain and catabolic state where you can't build muscle. It crushes your hormones even further. It crushes your sleep. Now people say, no, it helps me sleep. No, it does not. It helps you fall asleep. But what it does, and I love to talk about sleep, there are two key stages of sleep, times during your sleep cycle that are so important. That's the deep sleep cycle. You need an hour of deep sleep every night, and you need 2 hours of REM sleep every night. Alcohol crushes deep sleep. This is why you drink and you fall asleep, but you wake up in the morning, you still feel like crap, right? You feel like you didn't sleep, you don't feel refreshed. It's because it destroys the deep sleep. What that does, it raises your resting heart rate, it raises your cortisol levels. Now, when you have high cortisol, what does it do? It further crushes hormones, further causes inflammation, further tears up your gut, affects neurotransmitter production. It's an endless cycle. Raises blood sugar, which has further cascade of events. It becomes this ugly cascade that is so harmful in so many ways for your body, you can't even count. And so when people start to realize that, it makes all the difference in the world. So, what I do with my clients, I love to use wearable technology because the data doesn't lie. And when you measure it, you can manage it. When you know your numbers, you're able to really track outcomes. And so I'll put a continuous glucose monitor on my clients, a blood sugar monitor, and we'll see what happens. And when they see how horrible their blood sugar is after they drink, even if they haven't eaten, I don't care, it doesn't matter. Or even the next morning, they've been fasting for 12 hours and the blood sugar is still 150. It's very eye-opening to see the real data, the real results, real time, what's happening to your body. And that's when people start to make change and start to really wake up. And so it's one of those things, like you said, you don't necessarily feel a difference, but it's making a massive difference.
So let's talk about a couple things here that, I know that, when we think about, and I 100% concur, is that when we look at the leaders in the world, the CEOs, the business owners, those individuals that are kind of really driving the bus, responsible for a lot of different things, and their health is so important. But let's think about even these tests. They're not free. So, there probably some relatively significant cost depending on where you are in the pay scale, so to speak. But what does somebody do that, wants to be healthier, can't afford the tests, but understands that, I want to be healthier, so
Sure.
I'll just because, I'll give you mine. I don't want to make this about me, but I'll give you kind of my own supplemental protocol, and you can kind of, because and I've played with it over the years. What I've come to is, I do 50 milligrams of zinc. I do at least 10,000 IUs of vitamin D. I do biotin. I do magnesium. I do creatine. All of that. And magnesium was a game changer for me, by the way, for a lot of different reasons. Those are that's my vitamin C. Those are all my protocols that I do, and then omega-3s of some sort, fish oils of some sort. Like, that's going by my memory right now. That's what I come up with. So those fundamental to me are staples. I've dialed that into. That's really what seems to work and make me feel better. I arrived at that just through, number one, I had some benchmarks. I had some testing over the years. That's where I arrived at. So is that okay? Like, I feel good. I've tested well, a couple of years ago, but what do you think of that? What do you say to somebody who goes, I can't afford a frickin' test with Dr. Tracy?
Yeah. So, first of all, it comes down to how much do you spend on travel? How much do you spend on food? How much do you spend on your car? How much do you spend on vacations? How much do you spend on all this other stuff? And, can you not afford it? Or are you really more focused on spending your money on other things that maybe are not quite as important? So that's the first thing I'll emphasize.
Yeah.
Our insurance coverage is awful. Insurance is really for disease. If you go to your primary care doctor and ask for some of the blood tests I'm talking about, they will look at you like you have 3 eyes. They won't even understand why you're asking for these. And it's because we're not trained in our medical school system. We're not trained in any of this stuff. This was, again, me going back to spending a decade going back to school, relearning all this stuff the right way that they don't teach you. And so insurance isn't going to cover it. And so it is going to be a lot of it out of pocket. Yes. The answer is, first of all, there are ways that you can budgetize and you can, cut out certain tests, and some tests are more expensive than others. And so that's a whole separate, private conversation with someone who's looking to save a buck here or there. But I think it comes down to, again, investing in yourself, investing in your health. And there are a lot of things that, what I like to say is there are a lot of things that everybody out there should be doing. And I can go through a lot of rapid fire suggestions for lifestyle, behavioral kind of things that everybody should be doing that don't cost you anything. But I would still recommend, even if you're doing all those things, that you still need to get some form of basic testing, even if it's blood testing. A lot of the blood tests you can get for under $500, get a massive panel of over 100 labs. So it can be affordable if done right.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point, and that is, what is it worth? Like, you would invest in your health to, at least, if nothing else, get benchmarks, get some kind of markers that you can compare to, down the road, that you could share with a doctor or something at some point, going, if you do get sick, at least you have some kind of markers going, holy cow, that's where you were. This is where you're at. This could be a flag, something to pay attention to. Is there, but when we consider our overall health, if you will, I don't know where I want to go with it, but, I consider training. Is there when you're working with clients, are you saying, okay, you need to get out and you need to walk those 10,000 steps a day. You need to, lift weights of some sort. You need to stress your body. If you've got inflammation, that in itself is a flag that, hey, why have you got inflammation? You have to look at it. You have to consider it. And then I would ask the question, now at this point in my life, sometimes I got achy joints, my knees bug me. I've had, an injury years ago, and now it's starting to show up as inflammation. Now, is that normal, or is it something that, maybe an adjustment of diet would take that inflammation away? What's your kind of guidance in that spectrum of thoughts?
Great question. I don't consider any of that normal, honestly. I think that people accept it as the natural aging process. They just accept that, oh, I'm over 50, I'm over 60, so that's just part of life. And I got to say, no, BS, it's not part of life. We just come to accept it. There are a lot of triggers for that kind of stuff. I'll give you so many stories. So one of my clients was a race car driver, and he came to me because his decision-making focus on the track, something was off. Couldn't figure out what it was, but decision-making was off. And going 200 miles an hour around corners is kind of important, that you can think quickly and make quick decisions. For him, it was all in his gut. He had gut issues. He had food sensitivity issues that was causing systemic inflammation. He didn't need a nootropic, a magic peptide, or a drug or something to make him think clearer. He needed nutrition and a few supplements to clean up his gut. I see so many people who have issues with inflammation, like you're talking about, with brain fog or can't lose weight, and they're eating the wrong foods. They're not bad foods, but based on their body, based on their genetics, based on their functional testing, it's wrong for their body. And so there are a lot of things that you can do when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to lifestyle, that can help solve a lot of that. And then there are regenerative treatments as well. So regenerative medicine is helping the body help itself. We're talking about PRP and stem cell therapy. These are treatments that you can do that help your body heal and can often completely eliminate knee pain, shoulder pain, elbow pain, tennis elbow, you name it. And all it is, it's cellular therapy. It's taking your own cells, concentrating them, and then putting them where you need them to help your body heal itself. So that's the magic of what we can do now. That has nothing to do with pharmaceuticals, nothing to do with surgery, nothing to do with traditional healthcare, but it can help alleviate the stuff you're talking about.
Now, so let's talk about specifically, you mentioned stem cells. So I've been intermittent fasting now for, I don't know, a couple of years. I'm pretty solid with it. I'm pretty committed to it. And I've got into my groove where, going 16, 18, 20 hours.
Yeah.
Occasionally I do a 48 or even a 72-hour fast. It doesn't really bother me. I don't struggle to do that anymore.
Sure.
But my understanding is based on the research that I've heard. And again, what do you trust and what do you don't trust without actually having tests done? But my understanding is that in the intermittent fasting world, your body starts to produce stem cells after, I think, 48 hours or even maybe a shorter period of time, and then really escalates into that 72-hour window. Can you confirm or clarify that kind of thought process, Dr. Tracy?
Yeah, so you're right that your body still has stem cells. Even till the day you die, your body has stem cells in it. Now, do they lose power? Do they lose quantity? Absolutely, yes. The magic of fasting is it's a stressor to our system. Okay, it is helping your body, take out the trash. Autophagy is the word for the process
Yes.
where your body clears cellular debris, clears toxins, and helps it basically heal itself. You do get a ramp up in production, make no mistake about it, of those key restorative repair cells that your body needs during fasting. The reason why it's not quite as significant as, specific PRP or stem
Sure.
cell therapy, for example, is that it's not concentrated where you want it, where you need it most.
Mm.
So, for example, I had tennis elbow, and about 3 weeks ago, I had a PRP injection, and that's concentrating that right where your body needs it to heal itself, for example. Yeah.
What does the PRP stand for?
So PRP is platelet-rich plasma.
Okay.
That means that they draw your blood, we spin it down, we isolate it's called the Buffy coat, which is the layer of platelets, which has all the healthy growth factors, cytokines, and that's what's going to stimulate massively increased repair.
Now, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but I do want to go back to microbiomes and biomes and the gut health. And a book I read many years ago, I've probably forgotten a bunch of it, was, your gut is your second brain. I think some version of that title. And people just don't realize how significant a factor our gut is to
Yeah.
a lot of things of how we operate, how we think, or how we feel, back to even inflammation, brain fog, all of those things. Do you want to comment on that a little bit further?
Yeah, absolutely. So the gut controls everything. You're exactly right. And I'll give you an example. So a lot of men and women have issues with weight gain, right? Men, especially, it's the belly fat. No matter what you do, you can't shake it. Women have the fat in their butt. And a big driver for that is blood sugar regulation. And we've all heard of GLP-1 by now. GLP-1 it's the biggest rave you hear on social media everywhere you turn. It's the peptide that can help you lose weight. Okay, semaglutide is the name of the generic name for this peptide. GLP-1 is actually made by your gut. GLP-1 is what signals your brain to tell you when to stop eating when you're full. It tells your stomach when you're full so that you don't eat as much. It helps tell the pancreas to produce more insulin, better insulin efficiency, so that you control blood sugar better. All of those mechanisms help you burn fat, lose weight. When your microbiome is messed up, when the balance of the good bugs and bad bugs, to put it simply, is out of balance, it kills the key bugs. Akkermansia is the key cornerstone bacteria that helps the L cell, which is the cell in your gut, produce this magic peptide that your body makes to help control blood sugar and control weight.
Mm.
And so the great example of how when a lot of people can't lose weight, it may be simply because of the microbiome.
And so what should somebody consider? A change of diet? How would they know what diet? Like what do we
Yeah.
know is for sure take it off the list, quit eating it? I mean, certainly fast foods come immediately into that category, sugars and all of those kind of
Yeah.
things. But what are some of the other things that maybe people are eating and not even understanding the impact of it's having, and they maybe think they're eating healthy?
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest disruptors of the microbiome is sugar.
Mm.
So sugar, especially alcohol, refined processed sugar, even seed oils, inflammatory seed oils, all of these can disrupt that microbiome and cause major issues. Um, and so there's a lot of foods that can definitely crush it. What can you do to help it? Fiber is a great food for the good bugs, the healthy commensal bacteria, which is really what you want in your microbiome. So plenty of fiber is always critically important. Green leafy vegetables, whole foods. People try to push me. Well, do you recommend keto or paleo or vegan or Mediterranean or carnivore or this or that? And well, there's a lot of nuance around that related to genetics and functional testing and individualization. But in general, if you just focus on doing nothing else other than just simply eating real food,
Hmm.
just real food that either is an animal. If you eat meat, great. If you eat fish, great. Otherwise, eat plants, eat vegetables, eat fruit, eat real food, and you'd be amazed at the amazing difference just that change alone will do to your body.
Hmm. It is interesting. I think it was Huberman that says, eat fish, eat beef, eat pork, like eat meat and fish, eat fruits, eat vegetables, and you will be golden. Like that will
Yeah,
be, that's all you
yeah,
need to really do. But everybody, well, many, we get sucked into, the breads, the grains, those carbohydrates. But without going down that path too deep, but one of the things that has become a topic, at least in what I'm seeing, is that we just don't eat enough protein, full stop. Fruits and vegetables aside, we're
mhm,
eating, we
yeah,
live into this world of carbohydrates, and we're not eating enough protein, which of course is
mhm,
what our bodies need to
right.
maintain muscle. What are you seeing, or what's your kind of thought process or philosophy on that?
Yeah, most people will say, "No, I eat plenty of protein." That's not me. So what I always do is I say, "Let's track it. Just measure it."
Mm.
And so there are free apps you can get on your phone. There's Chronometer, MyFitnessPal, there's several others, or you can simply get a pen and paper and track everything you eat for 3 days in a row. Just track it. Do nothing else but measure it
Mm.
and count. Most people are shocked at 2 things. Number 1, they're shocked at how many calories they're eating. They had no idea they're eating that many
Yeah.
calories.
Yeah.
And number 2, you're spot on that people don't realize how many carbs they're eating in relation to protein.
Yeah.
And the biggest way to lose weight and specifically burn fat, build muscle is to simply make sure you're getting enough protein. That's
Mhm.
it. And so
So
the
hard to
best
do.
way
It's hard to do, as a
you're exactly right. It requires work. You have to be very intentional and plan and be strategic with your meals,
yeah,
with your shopping,
yeah,
but you can do it. But the target is around 1 gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight.
yeah. Ideal body weight, yeah,
Ideal body weight. So
yeah,
about around 1 pound. Now, most people don't do 1 gram. They end up getting around 0.6, 0.8.
yeah.
1 gram is your goal, should be your goal every day.
Yeah. And I, when I go on my kind of, okay, I'm going to lean out, or I'm going to, when I'm good. When I set a goal, like I've got a couple of apps, I really track my calories, but also my macronutrients, micronutrients. I kind of pay attention to it. My point is that my ideal weight, at 6'1", I really work well and pretty lean at about 192, 193 pounds. So I go, a gram of protein, and it's really hard to get that 193 grams of protein in a day. Like, it takes real effort to make
It
that
is.
happen. So I'm just bringing that up, and with no other reason. I'm not making excuses, but it is something that you, to your point, you have to be very intentional and very focused in order to achieve those goals, which
Mhm.
doesn't make it easy. But again, when we want to stand out and be healthy and be the center of our universe, and be there for those that we support in our world, including ourselves, I think that's how intentional you got to get. That's just the way it is. We're sedentary in terms of our lifestyle. Technology's made life really easy.
Yeah.
I know myself that, I work a lot. From a writing point of view, I'm in front of my laptop far too often. And if I get into a mode where I'm really having fun writing, it's hard to peel me away from there. And I got to force myself to go out. And fortunately, we live on 5 acres. We got 2 big dogs, and, so they're insisting that I take them for a walk out in the back 40. But that's also environment, is creating an environment for your own success. And when you're looking and working with some of your patients, you got to see that is that part of your guidance as well? Is like, what is your
Yeah.
environment?
Yeah.
Are you setting yourself up for success, or are you setting
Yeah.
yourself up for failure?
Yeah. Great point. So one of the biggest issues I find is high performers, they know what to do, but why don't they do it? Right?
Hmm.
Here I was a
There.
men's health
Let's answer
expert,
that question, Dr.
right?
Tracy.
I'm operating. I'm doing robotic surgery, treating cancer, saving lives every day, and here I am neglecting my health as well.
Yeah.
And the answer is we don't have consistency. We don't have discipline, and willpower will lose every
Every
day
time.
over discipline.
Yeah.
And so you have to have consistent habits. And so this gets me to one of my favorite books of all time, Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg. Now,
Mm.
Atomic Habits by James Clear is great also, but I really would recommend everyone out there read Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg. He's a Stanford professor. And what he talks about is ABC, basically. Anchor is A. What's the anchor in your life that you can tie a B behavior to? And then C, celebrate so that you'll continue and perpetuate that good behavior. Example would be, he gives this in the book. BJ gives the book. Every time he pees, he does 2 push-ups.
Mm.
Pee, 2 push-ups. Pee, 2 push-ups. Now, he may do 100 push-ups that day, but he's always going to do at least 2 every time he pees.
Mm-hmm.
The caveat, the reason this is so important, this is a critical distinction here, is not that those 2 push-ups are going to help you lose weight or build muscles, your pecs. It's not that. It's the consistent habits that you're ingraining. It's the behavioral change that you're training yourself to always be disciplined to do what you know you're supposed to do, but you're not doing it. And so you find an anchor in your daily life, tie a behavior to it. You got to celebrate the win. The win is you did it. The win is you actually disciplined enough to do what you know you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that perpetuates behavior change. And so a lot of what we do is getting leaders to buy into their own accountability by establishing daily consistency in the little tiny things that make all the difference in the world. Another great one is in the morning. When you get up in the morning, 6 a.m., my tennis shoes are right there by my coffee maker.
Set yourself up for success. Yeah.
I can make coffee and put my ass on the couch and just sit there for an hour and scroll and read emails and waste time, but I got to put my shoes on. Now I can put my shoes on and do nothing else. And I will have succeeded in fulfilling that discipline, in that consistent behavior that I'm supposed to do. But once you get your shoes on, what are you going to do? You're going to go for a walk. And that's the hardest part. So you find the hardest trigger. How can you overcome that? And so a lot of nuance around behavior change coming down to tiny habits.
It's interesting is the way I've set up my office is I've actually got a gym in my office. And, one of my commitments in the 10,000 steps. And of course, when weather's bad, you don't want to go out, you don't want to go for that walk, but I have a rebounder, and my commitment is like, I literally will trip over my rebounder to get to my office. So it's like in my face, like, okay, well, I'll do 5 minutes,
Yeah.
which then turns to 10 often, or
Yep.
15. And, I find rebounding very effective in terms of, I think it's better than walking, but that's just my story. I don't know if it is from a health point of view. Some research says that it's as good as walking, but there, it's right in front of me. I trip over it. Otherwise, I feel pretty guilty if I don't. I don't know where we can go with this really, but I was something interesting that showed up for me recently, Dr. Tracy, was a comment that somebody made. And because we're talking about kind of that mental side of things where we, get to do or not do, and habits, and I have read Atomic Habits. I'm a big fan of James Clear. I followed his career.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And but somebody somebody said, and I got to find the quote again, but he goes, habits, the term habit is actually used incorrectly, because a habit is something that you do unconsciously. You're really unconscious about it. Once you are aware of it and calling it a habit, it's no longer a habit, it's a choice. And you use the word discipline, which that to me is the real word. Is not, I don't have to create habits, because it's not a habit. You don't create a habit, it's a choice.
Right.
Once you think it's, habit is a mindless thing, and you're not aware of, you're doing it. We call smoking habits. We have this term, but he pointed out, I don't know if I agree or disagree, but I went, oh, what an interesting thought. Is if you're aware of it, it's not a habit, it's a choice. Then comes in discipline, and I'm a big fan of the term discipline and using discipline. I don't know if you have some thoughts on it. I don't know where I'm going with it, but I just wanted to put it on the table.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on. It comes down to, when there's a choice, you will fail. Everyone will fail. We are weak. We are mortals, and willpower will always lose to discipline. And so you have to, in my mind, establish it where there is no choice. It's what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, habit may be the wrong word, but whatever that behavior is, it needs to be ingrained that that's just what you do. There's no other choice. And that's how you develop that consistency and that discipline.
Well, I think all of it is just a mental game anyways, so in other words, you have to pay attention to your mental game. Even the term willpower, somebody says they don't have the willpower. Well, turn it into want power. The whole thing about willpower, even I need to be motivated, that term about being, I need to be motivated, that indicates right there that it's not something you want to do. If you have to use willpower to get over something, to your point, it's a losing game. It's obviously something that you don't want to do, and you're trying to will your way through it, as opposed to flipping it and turning it into something that makes sense, and that mentally you go, okay, no, I'm going to shift how I view that particular world. And I just see it as such an important part of even the work you're doing. You mentioned that you have, it's part of what your team does, is you talk about those kind of mental hacks. How do you kind of approach it from the Institute's point of view?
Yeah, I recognize that the mindset piece is without question the most important part of what we do. And when clients work with us, I truly believe that the biggest transformation happens just by enrollment, just by enrolling in our program. When you raise your hand and when you commit, you have made the biggest transformation, because you're finally committing to yourself. And we talked almost an hour ago about, how do you get people to pursue their health when they feel fine. When someone is able to commit to something like that, that's a huge win in and of itself. So mindset's first, but the big part of that is, how do you stay committed for those who are, weak, who still don't have the discipline yet? And I like to fall back on your why. And your why is different than anybody else's why, but what's your personal why? What's it all about for you? What's the point of all this you're doing every day? Why do you wake up every day? For me, it's my kids. Like, nothing will make me cry like talking about how amazing my kids are and how important they are to me. And so everything I do is so that I can show up at the end of my busy day, running my team, building a business, being a leader in the community, and doing podcasts with you and all this other fun stuff I love doing. But what's more important than any of that is how I'm able to be present and engaged to those two amazing kids when I get home. And so everything I do has to align with that. If it doesn't, what the hell is it for? And so I get people to journal, to document gratitude. What are they grateful for? The gap in the gain concept of be grateful for what you've achieved, not what you're lacking. And then what's it all about? What's your why? What's the most important thing in your life? And is everything you're doing aligned with that? And so there's a lot of mindset work that I think has to come before you start talking about hormones and gut health and peptides and all the other fun stuff that we do.
Well, I love that. And I think it's so critical. I mean, how are you setting yourself up for success? And back to, and what you just said is so important. The foundation of it all is, why am I doing this? And why is it important to me? And often, because
Yeah.
it's also important to your kids. They want a dad that they're going to, watch get old and maybe celebrate grandchildren or whatever that might be. So it's the
Mhm.
connecting the dots mentally from it. Now, I don't want to step over, when you look at your clinic, your institute. Do you have a kind of a grand vision or a grand mission that you're going to
Yeah.
make 1 million people healthy, or where are you at with that?
Bigger than that. Yeah. So my goal is to really reinvent our healthcare system, help leaders be their absolute best again. You remember how good you used to feel back in your 20s and 30s. You remember how you were at your best. So I want to help leaders be their absolute best again. And I want to empower other doctors to practice cutting edge, innovative healthcare like I'm doing as well, and carry forth this mission. And so the next big phase of what I'm really passionate and focused on, I get all excited about right now, is training other doctors how to get out of that broken healthcare system that they're stuck in and do what I'm doing. Because I tell you, I can only reach so many people treating patients, with my medical team, getting on podcasts, sharing my message. But when I can start training other doctors how to follow my footsteps and do what I'm doing, that's how it'll gain exponential exposure. And that's going to really carry forth the mission.
I love that. So as we wind down, and before I get into my rapid fire little segment we have some fun with, is there
Cool.
anything that we didn't talk about that you want to shine a light on before we kind of wind down?
So I have a gift for your listeners. I have a bunch of resources I'd be happy to share if now is the right time for that or not.
Let's do it.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so my website's gapininstitute.com, GAPIN Institute. But if you'll go to gapininstitute.com/launch, there are a number of free gifts there, free resources for anyone listening. There's a copy of my best-selling book, Mel 2.0, a digital copy. There's a copy of my high performance health handbook, copy of my ultimate peptide guide that goes into much deeper detail about a lot of peptides that I mentioned today. There's a copy of what else is in there? A bunch of other gifts in there as well
Cool.
that you can get at again, gapininstitute.com/launch. Again, all those resources are my gift to your community.
Fantastic. And we'll make sure that all of that is in the description when we push this out. Love it. Okay.
Cool.
So let's wind down. I go through what we call rapid fire questions that aren't always so rapid fire, but we have some fun doing it anyways.
Sure.
And simple and easy. Android or Apple?
Apple.
Okay. Are you a through and through Apple guy?
Everything's Apple. There's no PC, no Android. Yeah, we have one employee in my business who has an Android, and we all make fun of him.
Yeah, fire him, get rid of him. Okay.
Yeah, he shouldn't be there.
So, favorite tune, favorite band, anything that kind of really stands out for you? Are you a bit of a music guy?
The Script. I'm a big music guy. The Script is my favorite band, and there's a song that was a big trigger for me back 15 years ago when I was very frustrated, disillusioned with medicine. And when I went through the healthcare crisis that I shared with you, there's a song they wrote called "It's Not Right for You." And listen to the song, but the key line that drives home my point here is, if you don't love what you do, it's not right for you. And that's what got me to leave. Honestly, is my experience that I went through, and that song got me to leave a 7-figure practice to start from scratch with the Gapin Institute. And I'm thrilled that I did. I can't believe I waited so long, but that was a key song for me.
Well, interesting. Sometimes, okay, well, we'll carry on. Otherwise, we're going to get into a whole new conversation. Favorite book, aside from a song that kind of was a fork in the road moment for you, was there a favorite book that was that you gift out or that you recommend, or was maybe even a fork in the road moment for you?
Yeah, How to Win Friends, Influence People, by far. Amazing book. Classic. Yeah.
Favorite movie? Any favorite movies that stand out?
Pulp Fiction. No
Pulp
question.
Fiction. Oh,
Pulp
that's
Fiction.
a classic.
Best movie of all time. There you go.
Going back into the oldies for sure.
Oldies.
So when you get to the gates and you meet God, what do you want him to say? It.
I'm proud of the father that you were.
Beautiful. And final question for today, Dr. Tracy, what are you grateful for?
My beautiful wife and my amazing little kids.
And I am always grateful for my guests like you. I am grateful for my amazing wife, my children, my grandchildren, and appreciate the conversation today. I've learned so much, and I appreciate your time and the wisdom and the experience that you brought to the show today. Thanks very much, Dr. Tracy.
Thank you so much.